Chancellor Palpatine has just informed Anakin Skywalker that he's been granted a seat on the Jedi Council. The words still echo in the air. In our timeline, Anakin accepts, but not without bitterness. He is placed among the Order's greatest masters, yet denied the rank of master himself. It humiliates him. It feeds the quiet resentment already growing inside his heart. That resentment becomes anger, and that anger becomes Darth Vader. But imagine this moment unfolding differently. Imagine Anakin pausing. He stands in Palpatine's office, the vast skyline of Coruscant stretching endlessly beyond the glass. The city hums with speeders and distant traffic. The Republic is at war. The galaxy is tired. And here he is, a young Jedi Knight being handed unprecedented power. He feels it, that subtle unease in the Force, a whisper, a warning. Instead of reacting, instead of letting pride speak first, Anakin closes his eyes. Just for a second, he breathes. When he opens them, there's clarity there, Chancellor. He says carefully, I'm honored by your confidence in me. But the Jedi Council should choose its own members, not politicians. I still have much to learn. My place is with the Jedi as a knight. The room would go silent. Palpatine's smile would remain. Of course it would. He's far too practiced to let emotion slip. But behind his eyes, something would crack. This wasn't supposed to happen. For years, he had cultivated Anakin-like, a gardener shaping the perfect weapon. Every compliment, every private conversation, every carefully planted doubt about the Jedi, all leading to this moment. Anakin was meant to feel entitled, isolated, angry at the Council. Instead, he chose humility. For a split second, a flicker too fast for most to notice, Palpatine's mask would slip. Not rage, not yet, but calculation. Rapid, dangerous calculation. He would pivot quickly. My dear boy, he'd say, in that warm, grandfatherly tone. Imagine the good you could do from within the Council. The Republic needs strong voices, especially in these uncertain times. He might even lean closer, lowering his voice. There are matters, sensitive matters, that only someone in your position could help address. A temptation disguised as responsibility. But if Anakin remained steady, grounded in the Force instead of his pride, Palpatine would be forced to retreat. He would praise Anakin's wisdom, applaud his modesty, all while quietly rewriting his grand design. Because this decision would wound him in a way no Jedi blade ever could, Palpatine's greatest strength wasn't lightning or manipulation, it was certainty. He believed he understood every variable, every weakness, especially Anakin's. This moment would prove he didn't, and that doubt, however small, would be dangerous. Now imagine Anakin walking into the Jedi Council chamber. The circular room feels heavier than usual. The tall windows frame Coruscant's endless twilight. The Masters are already gathered, tension lingering from the Chancellor's political intrusion. Mace Windu speaks first, voice calm but sharp. We are aware of the Chancellor's appointment. It isn't accusation directed at Anakin. It carries weight. Anakin steps forward. I declined. Simple. Clear. The words ripple through the chamber like a disturbance in the Force. The Council should choose its own members. He continues. I'm not ready for that responsibility. I still have much to learn. There's no arrogance in his voice, no challenge, just honesty. For a long moment, no one speaks. Mace Windu had prepared for resistance, for defensiveness, perhaps even defiance. Instead, he sees something new, something he hadn't expected. Restraint, humility maybe. Growth. Yoda closes his eyes, reaching outward through the Force. For months, perhaps years, he has sensed turbulence around Skywalker. Fear, attachment, frustration. Now, something shifts. The storm quiets, not gone, but softer. Wise. This choice is, Yoda says gently, power refused when not ready for it. Rare, that is, Kiada Mundi. Studies Anakin thoughtfully. The Council is not a reward. It is a burden. Few understand that. Plo Koon's filtered voice hums. Softly. In turning away from power, you move closer to it. And for the first time in a long time, Anakin doesn't feel judged. He feels seen. This single act would change more than politics. It would change Anakin because resentment only grows in soil fed by wounded pride. By stepping away from forced power, He removes the seed Palpatine intended to nurture. Without the humiliation of being denied master rank, without the daily reminder that he was there by political interference, Anakin would step forward, his posture more confident than they had ever seen it, his presence in the Force calmer and more centered. Masters, I have declined the Chancellor's appointment. I believe the Council should choose its own members, and I don't feel I have the wisdom or experience necessary for such a role. I ask only to continue serving the Order as a knight, learning from all of you. The Council members would exchange glances, each processing this unexpected development through their own perspective. Mace Windu, who had been prepared for a confrontation, would find himself genuinely impressed. This showed more wisdom and humility than he had ever seen from the young Skywalker. Perhaps they had underestimated him. Perhaps there was hope for his development after all. Yoda would sense the shift in Anakin immediately through the Force. The burden of resentment, the growing darkness that had been clouding the young Jedi's presence, fog before the morning sun, the ancient Jedi Master would close his eyes, extending his senses, and feel something he hadn't felt from Anakin in years. Peace. True, inner peace. Wise, this decision is, Yoda would say, his voice carrying approval. That Anakin had rarely heard directed at him. Ready for the Council? Perhaps you are not, but ready for growth? Yes. Ready for learning? You are. Ki-Adi-Mundi would lean forward, his elongated head tilted in consideration. This shows remarkable maturity, young Skywalker. The Council is not a prize to be won or a position to be granted by politicians. It is a responsibility that must be earned through years of service and wisdom. Plo Koon, his voice filtered through his breathing apparatus, would add his own perspective in declining power when it was offered freely. You demonstrate that you might one day be worthy of it. This is the Jedi way. Even Shakti would nod, approvingly, her lakus swaying gently. The Force works in mysterious ways. Perhaps this seeming setback is actually the first step toward your true destiny. But the most significant reaction would come from Obi-Wan Kenobi. When he learned of Anakin's decision, either through official channels or through his former Padawan's direct communication, he would feel a wave of emotions: relief, pride, hope, and something he hadn't felt about Anakin in years: trust. The constant worry that had been eating at him, the sense that he was losing his former apprentice to forces beyond his control, would suddenly ease. Obi-Wan would seek out Anakin immediately, finding him perhaps in the temple's meditation gardens, sitting quietly among the softly glowing plants that flourished in the carefully controlled environment. Anakin, he would say, settling beside his former Padawan on one of the stone benches. I heard about your decision regarding the council seat. Anakin would look up, perhaps expecting criticism or questions about his political judgment. Instead, he would see something in Obi-Wan's eyes that he hadn't seen in too long: unqualified approval. I hope I did the right thing, Master. It just felt ... wrong, like I was being used. Your instincts serve you well, Obi-Wan would reply, placing a hand on Anakin's shoulder. The Force was guiding you, even if you didn't fully realize it at the time. This decision shows more wisdom than accepting a dozen council seats could have. This conversation would mark the beginning of a renewed relationship between master and student. Without the political pressures and resentments that had been driving them apart, they could return to their natural dynamic of mutual respect and affection. Obi-Wan would see this as an opportunity to address some of the underlying issues that had been troubling Anakin, while Anakin would feel more open to guidance without the defensive walls he had been building. The impact on Anakin's personal life would be equally profound. When he returned to his secret apartment to tell Padmé about his decision, he would find her in their living area, reviewing Senate documents as she often did in the evenings. The soft lighting of their private space, so different from the formal chambers of politics and Jedi business, would seem to embrace him as he entered. Padmé, he would say. And she would immediately hear something different in his voice, a lightness that had been absent for months. When he explained his choice, her reaction would be immediate and visceral. She would set aside her documents and cross to him, taking his hands in hers. "Oh, Anakin," she would whisper, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm so proud of you. I've been so worried about what all this political maneuvering was doing to you, to us. This shows the man I fell in love with, the man who always tries to do what's right, not what's easy or advantageous. Their relationship, which had been strained by secrecy, political pressures, and Anakin's growing darkness, would begin to heal from this moment. Without the constant stress of his council obligations and the resentment they generated, Anakin would be more present in their marriage, more able to support Padme in her own political struggles. This would be especially important as Padme's pregnancy progressed. In the original timeline, Anakin's increasing instability and his visions of her death had created a spiral of fear. Without this inside intelligence, Palpatine would be operating partially blind during the most critical phase of his takeover. He would still have other sources, his network of spies, his political allies, his control over the clone army, but the loss of real-time information from the Jedi Council would force him to take greater risks and make more assumptions. The Chancellor would need to accelerate certain aspects of his timeline while completely rethinking others. The careful balance he had maintained between his roles as politician and Sith Lord would become harder to sustain. He might need to rely more heavily on Count Dooku, despite their relationship having soured considerably. Or he might need to cultivate new assets within the Jedi Order, though finding someone with Anakin's access and potential for corruption would be nearly impossible. More critically, Palpatine would need to completely revise his approach to turning Anakin to the dark side. The slow burn of political resentment and institutional frustration would no longer be viable strategies. Instead, he would need to focus more intensely on Anakin's other vulnerabilities: his fear of loss, his attachment to Padme, his anger about his mother's death, his frustration with the Jedi's perceived inaction. This might lead Palpatine to take more direct and dangerous approaches. He might orchestrate threats against Padme more blatantly, or find ways to remind Anakin of his failures and losses. He might even consider revealing more of his true nature earlier, gambling that he could present the dark side as a necessary tool for protecting those Anakin loved. However, these more aggressive tactics would be much riskier. Anakin's improved emotional state and his strengthened relationships within the Jedi Order would make him more resilient to such manipulation. The very act of choosing humility over power would have reinforced his connection to the light side of the Force, making him more likely to recognize and resist temptation. This could lead to several different timeline branches, each with its own dramatic implications for the galaxy. Let's explore the first major possibility. Anakin discovers Palpatine's true identity as a Sith Lord much earlier than in the original timeline. In this scenario, Palpatine's more aggressive and desperate tactics would leave clues that a calmer, more centered Anakin would be better equipped to notice. Perhaps during one of their regular conversations, the Chancellor would let slip some knowledge he shouldn't have, or make a suggestion that could only come from someone with deep understanding of the dark side. Picture this scene. Anakin sits in Palpatine's office, as he has dozens of times before, but this time something feels different. The Chancellor is discussing the war, mentioning strategic details that weren't in any briefing Anakin attended. When Anakin questions how he knows these things, Palpatine's explanation doesn't quite add up. The Senate receives many intelligence reports, my boy Palpatine says, but his eyes don't meet Anakin's, and there's something in his Force presence that sets off alarm bells. Later, as Anakin walks through the temple corridors, these inconsistencies would gnaw at him. In the original timeline, his emotional turmoil would have overwhelmed such subtle warnings. But now, with his mind clear and his connection to the Force stronger, he would be able to process these concerns more rationally, might begin to research, to ask careful questions, to pay closer attention to patterns he had previously missed. The pieces of the puzzle: Palpatine's rise to power, his convenient emergence during various crises, his unusual knowledge of Jedi affairs, would begin to form a disturbing picture. The moment of realization would be explosive. Perhaps it would come during another private meeting, when Palpatine, frustrated by his inability to corrupt Anakin through traditional means, would finally reveal his true identity in a last-ditch effort at seduction. Anakin Palpatine would say, his voice taking on a different quality. There are things about the Force that the Jedi haven't taught you. Powers that could save those you love, bring peace to the galaxy, end this war. I could teach you these things. And this time, instead of desperate interest, Anakin would feel a chill of recognition. What are you talking about, Chancellor? I am talking about the power of the dark side, young Skywalker. I am Darth Sidious, and I could be your master. In the original timeline, this revelation came at Anakin's lowest point, when he was desperate. To save Padme, and already deeply corrupted by months of political manipulation. But now, faced with this same revelation while in a healthier mental state, Anakin's response would be entirely different. The shock would be immense, but instead of temptation, he would feel betrayal and anger, righteous anger, the kind that strengthens rather than corrupts. All those years of friendship, of guidance, of paternal care, all revealed as manipulation by the very evil the Jedi had sworn to oppose. Anakin would not strike out in rage, as he might have in the original timeline. Instead, he would center himself in the Force, draw on the teachings that Obi-Wan and Yoda had given him, and respond with the wisdom of a true Jedi. "I trusted you," he would say, his voice steady, despite the storm of emotions within. "You were like a father to me, and all this time, you were the enemy we've been fighting." Palpatine, realizing his gambit had failed, might try one last desperate appeal. "Anakin, think of Padme. Your visions of her death, they will come true unless you learn the power to save her. Only through the dark side can you gain such power." But this Anakin, this wiser version, who had already chosen humility over power once, would have a different response. "The Force will guide me to save her, if it is meant to be, but I will not betray everything I believe, everyone I love, for the promise of power." "You've lost, Palpatine. The Jedi will stop you." The confrontation that would follow would be unlike anything we saw in the original films. Instead of a tortured young man torn between light and dark, Palpatine would face a confident Jedi Knight, backed by the full strength of the light side and the moral certainty of his cause. But Palpatine is not just any Sith Lord. He is one of the most powerful Force users in galactic history. The battle would be fierce, but Anakin would not be fighting alone. His clear thinking would allow him to send a distress signal to the Jedi Temple before the confrontation began, bringing Masters Windu, Yoda, and others to his aid. The arrival of multiple Jedi Masters would completely change the dynamic of the final confrontation. Instead of the desperate, undermanned mission we saw in Revenge of the Sith, this would be a coordinated effort by some of the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy, led by someone who knew Palpatine's tactics and secrets intimately. Master Windu would arrive first, his purple lightsaber blazing as he burst into the Chancellor's office to find Anakin locked in combat with the revealed Sith Lord. The sight would confirm everything the Jedi had suspected about the political situation, validating their concerns about Palpatine's growing power. "So, the mask finally comes off," Windu would say, adding his blade to the fight. The addition of his Vopod technique, which channeled and redirected dark side energy, would immediately put Palpatine on the defensive. When Yoda arrived, moving with that deceptive speed that belied his ancient age, the battle would effectively be over. Three of the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy, working in perfect coordination, would be more than even Darth Sidious could handle. The Sith Lord's defeat would be swift and decisive, but the implications of this early victory would ripple through the galaxy in ways both obvious and subtle. Without Palpatine to execute Order 66, the clone troopers' inhibitor chips would never be activated. The Jedi Order would survive. Battered by the Clone Wars but fundamentally intact, the immediate aftermath would be chaotic. The revelation that the Republic's Chancellor had been a Sith Lord all along would send shockwaves through the Senate. Emergency sessions would be called, emergency powers would need to be transferred, and the very foundation of the Republic's government would need to be examined and reformed. Padme Amidala would find herself at the center of these political developments. As one of the few senators who had consistently opposed Palpatine's expansion of executive power, she would be well positioned to help guide the Republic through this crisis. Her pregnancy, instead of being a source of fear and secrecy, could become a symbol of hope. New life emerging as the galaxy emerged from the shadow of the SITH. The Clone Wars would end very differently as well. Without Palpatine's influence, the Separatist movement would lose much of its coordination and funding. Count Dooku, if he survived Palpatine's fall, might even be approached about reconciliation. Many of the Separatist grievances were legitimate. Concerns about Republic overreach and corruption, concerns that Palpatine had been deliberately inflaming for his own purposes. With the real villain exposed and defeated, there might be room for genuine peace negotiations. Anakin, having proven himself in the most dramatic way possible, might even be chosen to serve as a mediator in these talks. His reputation as a war hero, combined with his demonstrated wisdom and moral courage, would make him an ideal candidate for such a role. But let's explore a second timeline branch, one where events unfold differently. What if Palpatine, despite losing his inside access to the Council, still managed to execute Order 66? What if his other preparations were sufficient to launch his coup even without Anakin's corruption? Picture the moment when the order goes out across the galaxy. Lone Commander Cody receives the transmission while serving alongside Obi-Wan on Utapau. But instead of hunting a single Jedi Master, he and his troops would find themselves facing both Obi-Wan and Anakin, fighting side by side as they had throughout the Clone Wars. The battle would be fierce, but two powerful Jedi Knights working in perfect coordination would be far more than any clone battalion could handle. They would fight their way to a ship and escape, but not before saving other Jedi who might have fallen in the original timeline. On Coruscant, the scene at the Jedi Temple would be dramatically different. Instead of Darth Vader leading the assault, the clone troopers would face the full strength of the Jedi Council. Masters Windu, Yoda Ki-Adi-Mundi, and others would organize a defense of the temple, evacuating younglings and Padawans while holding off the attackers. Anakin, arriving in the midst of this battle, would become a rallying point for the defenders. His power and skill, channeled through the light side rather than the dark, would inspire the other Jedi to greater heights of courage and effectiveness. The evacuation would be more successful than anyone dared hope. While the temple itself might still fall, hundreds of Jedi who died in the original Purge would escape to fight another day. The Jedi Order, instead of being reduced to a handful of survivors, would retain much of its strength and knowledge. The political situation would be more complex in this timeline. Palpatine's coup might still succeed in the short term, with his control over the Senate and the clone army allowing him to declare himself emperor. But without Darth Vader as his enforcer, the Empire would be built on much shakier foundations. The surviving Jedi, led by figures like Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Anakin, would immediately begin organizing resistance. Instead of the scattered, desperate rebellion we see in the original trilogy, this would be a coordinated effort by some of the most powerful Force users in the galaxy. Padme's role in this timeline would be crucial. As one of the few senators with both the moral authority and political skill to challenge Palpatine's power grab, she would become a key figure in the emerging rebellion. Her pregnancy, instead of being a source of vulnerability, would become a powerful symbol of the future they were fighting for. The early rebellion would be far more effective than its later counterpart. With Jedi Knights serving as leaders and special operatives, they could accomplish missions that would be impossible for ordinary rebels. Anakin, in particular, would become a legendary figure, the Jedi who stood up to the Emperor, the hero who chose light over darkness when it mattered most. But Palpatine would not give up. Easily recognizing the threat posed by the surviving Jedi, he would dedicate enormous resources to hunting them down. Dark side adepts, inquisitors, and bounty hunters would scour the galaxy, making life dangerous for any Force-sensitive individual. This would create a very different kind of conflict. From what we see in the original trilogy, instead of a technological terror like the Death Star, Palpatine might focus on developing Force-related weapons and techniques. Ancient Sith artifacts, dark side rituals, and forbidden technologies might all be employed in his war against the Jedi. The conflict would be more personal, more focused on the eternal struggle between light and dark, rather than the political and military aspects that dominated the original rebellion. Battles would be fought not just with starships and armies, but with lightsabers and Force powers. As Jedi strike teams conducted raids across the galaxy while Imperial forces tried to run them to ground, Anakin's children, when they were born, would grow up in this very different galaxy. Instead of being hidden away on remote worlds, they might be raised within the Jedi community, trained from birth in the ways of the Force by masters like their father, Obi-Wan, and Yoda. Luke and Leia would develop very differently in this timeline, growing up knowing their heritage, trained in the Force from early childhood, and surrounded by the love and wisdom of the Jedi Order. They would become powerful allies in the fight against the Empire, but they would also face challenges unknown. In the original timeline, As the children of the famous Anakin Skywalker, they would be prime targets for Imperial forces. Their training would need to emphasize not just power, but wisdom and restraint, as the dark side would constantly whisper to them about easier paths to victory. This timeline might see the emergence of a new generation of Jedi, trained not in peacetime but in the crucible of rebellion. These Jedi would be different from their predecessors, more willing to take direct action, more comfortable with warfare, but also more aware of the temptations that such circumstances could present. The eventual victory over the Empire, when it came, would be achieved through very different means. Instead of the destruction of the Death Star serving as the symbolic turning point, it might be a great battle between Jedi and Sith, light and dark, that finally tips the balance. Anakin's confrontation with Palpatine, delayed from the original timeline, would eventually come. But this time, he would face the Emperor not as a corrupted apprentice seeking redemption, but as a mature Jedi Master fighting to free the galaxy from tyranny. The battle would be epic in scope, representing not just a personal conflict, but the culmination of a galactic civil war. Anakin, drawing on decades of experience and the full power of the light side, would face Palpatine at the height of his dark power. But let's explore a third possibility, perhaps the most complex and tragic of all. What if, despite all the advantages of his wiser choice, Anakin still eventually fell to the dark side, but through different circumstances and at a much later time? In this scenario, Anakin's early wisdom in declining the council seat would give him years of stability and growth. He would become a respected Jedi Knight, perhaps even a master, with strong relationships throughout the Order. His marriage to Padme would be happy and stable, and they would raise their children together in peace. But the dark side is patient, and the prophecy of the Chosen One is not easily escaped. Perhaps years later, during a particularly difficult mission or personal crisis, Anakin would finally face temptations too great to resist. Imagine this. It's been 15 years since the Clone Wars ended with Palpatine's defeat. Anakin is now a Jedi Master, highly respected throughout the Order. Luke and Leia are teenagers, showing incredible potential in the Force. Padme has served multiple terms as Queen of Naboo and is now a key figure in the Reformed Republic. But then, a new threat emerges from the unknown regions. Ancient Sith artifacts are discovered, pointing to a dark side presence that predates even Palpatine. As the Jedi investigate, they uncover evidence of a Sith empire that has been growing in secret for centuries, preparing to invade the known galaxy. The war that follows is unlike anything the galaxy has seen. These new Sith are not subtle manipulators like Palpatine, but conquerors who believe in the raw power of the dark side. They bring with them technologies and techniques that challenge everything the Jedi thought they knew about the Force. In the desperate battles that follow, Anakin witnesses horrors that shake him to his core. Perhaps he sees Obi-Wan killed in battle, or watches as entire worlds are corrupted by dark side energy. The weight of being the Chosen One, the burden of having the power to potentially end the conflict but being restricted by Jedi principles, begins to wear on him. The turning point might come when the Sith target his family directly. Despite all precautions, despite the protection of the Jedi Order, Luke or Leia might be captured and tortured. Or perhaps Padme, now in her 50s but still beautiful and vital, is threatened in a way that awakens all of Anakin's old fears about loss, faced with the potential destruction of everything he loves. This older, wiser Anakin might make the same choice his younger self made in the original timeline, but for different reasons, not out of selfishness or ambition, but out of love and desperation. "I can end this war," he might tell the Jedi Council. "I know you feel it too. The dark side offers power that we need to defeat these invaders. If I just use it once, just enough to save everyone," the Council's response would be predictable. The dark side is never just used once. Power corrupts. The end doesn't justify the means. But this Anakin would have decades of service and sacrifice behind him. His fall, when it came, would be all the more tragic because it would come from love rather than hate. This version of Darth Vader would be completely different from the one we know. Instead of the bitter, twisted figure consumed by this would be a dark lord driven by protective instincts, twisted into possessive obsession. He would genuinely believe he was saving the galaxy, making the hard choices that others were too weak or too principled to make. His relationship with Luke and Leia would be complex beyond anything in the original trilogy. They would remember him as a loving father, which would make his fall even more heartbreaking. Instead of discovering that Vader is their father, they would have to watch their father become Vader. The dynamic between this version of Vader and his children would drive the entire conflict. Luke, trained in the Jedi arts from childhood, would be powerful enough to face his father in combat, but emotionally devastated by the necessity. Leia, perhaps choosing a different path than her brother, might become a political leader. But these same abilities could also be abused in terrifying ways. Authoritarian governments might use Force users as thought police, detecting dissent before it can be acted upon. Corrupt officials might use mind influence to escape justice or to manipulate legal proceedings. The very concept of mental privacy might become obsolete in societies where powerful Force users are integrated into government institutions. The development of legal frameworks that protect individual rights while still allowing for the beneficial use of Force abilities would become a major challenge for galactic civilization. Different societies might take very different approaches, leading to a patchwork of laws and regulations that could create conflicts between different jurisdictions. In our exploration of how Anakin's single decision might reshape the galaxy, we've seen that even the smallest choices can have profound and far-reaching consequences. The decision to decline a council seat, motivated by humility and wisdom rather than ambition and resentment, would set in motion changes that would ripple across generations. The psychological impact on Anakin himself would be the starting point, but the effects would spread to every relationship in his life, every political situation he touched, and ultimately to the entire structure of galactic civilization. Palpatine's plans would be disrupted, the Jedi Order might survive, and the balance between light and dark would be maintained through wisdom rather than restored through sacrifice. We've explored multiple possible timelines, ones where Anakin discovers Palpatine's identity early and helps defeat him before Order 66. Ones where the purge still happens, but Anakin fights alongside the other Jedi to preserve the Order. And ones where Anakin still eventually falls, but as a mature adult, making desperate choices rather than a confused young man being manipulated. Each of these timelines shows us something different about the nature of choice, the power of wisdom, and the ways that individual decisions can shape the fate of entire civilizations. They remind us that heroism isn't always about grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's about having the wisdom to step back, to choose humility over pride, to trust in something greater than your own ambitions. The galaxy that might have emerged from Anakin's wiser choice would be more diverse, more complex, and in many ways more hopeful than the one we know from the original trilogy. It would be a galaxy where the Force remained a known and acknowledged part of life, where different cultures could develop their own approaches to using and understanding these mysterious powers, and where the ancient conflict between light and dark could be balanced rather than cyclical. But it would also be a galaxy with its own challenges and dangers. The integration of Force abilities into everyday life would create new forms of inequality and new opportunities for abuse. The diversity of Force traditions might lead to conflicts between different philosophical approaches. The power that Force users possess would require constant vigilance to ensure it was used responsibly. In the end, this exploration reminds us that the Star Wars saga is ultimately about choice, the choices we make in moments of crisis, the values we hold onto when everything seems lost, and the wisdom to know when stepping back might be more heroic than stepping forward. Anakin Skywalker's tragedy was not that he was destined to fall to the dark side, but that he made choices that led him there step by imagining a different choice at a crucial moment. We can see how different the galaxy might have been. Not perfect, no galaxy could ever be perfect, but perhaps more balanced, more hopeful, and more true to the ideals that the Jedi Order was meant to represent. Sometimes the greatest act of power is knowing when not to use it, and sometimes the most profound wisdom is found in the simple word "no" spoken at exactly the right moment. The ripple effects of that single moment of humility would continue to spread across the galaxy for generations, touching the lives of countless beings and shaping the development of entire civilizations. It's a reminder that in our own lives, the choices we make, even ones that seem small and insignificant, can have consequences we never imagined, and perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. that wisdom, humility, and the courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult, are the forces that truly shape the universe. The Force may flow through all things, but it's the choices of individuals that determine whether that flow brings light or darkness to the galaxy.